What's up, everyone? Alex here, and welcome to my little corner of the internet. I wanted to talk about non-binary presentation and expression, especially the variability of such, because when we talk about presentation and gender nonconformity and things like that, I feel like there are certain expectations for non-binary people that they don't typically, that's typically not always a goal for them. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit. So I make a distinction between gender expression and gender presentation. Gender expression is all of the ways that you express your gender. It's not just the way you dress. It is your pronouns, the name you use, the gendered language you use for yourself, things like that. I consider presentation as a subset of this, and presentation is purely the outermost layer, the outer expression of your gender. So the way that you dress, your hairstyle, makeup or lack thereof, things like that. Don't ask me what I think of like the physiological stuff due to being on hormones or undergoing surgery. I don't really make a distinction there. I guess it would be, I would call it just generally part of your expression, but that's not what this is about. This is about expression and presentation in general. Non-binary people are typically assumed to want to engage in entirely neutral and ungendered expression and presentation. So the assumption is that a non-binary person might want to dress androgynously, use they, them pronouns, use non-gendered language entirely, so saying person instead of guy or gal. The reality is that gender is variable, and people will have different expressions to reflect or subvert their genders in different ways. Non-binary people don't all present the same way, and they don't all have the same preference for gendered language or other labels like that. They don't all use they, them pronouns, though some might want to do that. Some non-binary people use they, them. They might use she, her, it, its, he, him, neopronouns as well, especially ones that kind of have a certain feel to them, a certain either softness or sharpness that kind of, it's almost like feminine or masculine feeling pronouns in some ways. Culturally, some pronouns might feel softer and might feel more on the feminine side. That is entirely personal preference. So somebody might use fey, fair pronouns, and those might feel feminine to somebody. Somebody might use seer, and those might feel more masculine. In my case, I'm a non-binary man. I use he, him pronouns. I absolutely do not use they, them pronouns, and I don't use degendered language. So avoiding saying guy or man or sir is not ideal for me. No degendered language for me. No saying like person in order to avoid saying man, like I am a man. I'm a non-binary man, but I'm still a man. Not all non-binary people dress androgynously. Some may lean more masculine or feminine. Some might have a xenon or agenderin sort of presentation. Agenderin being related to agender, xenon being related to xenogender. And in my case, sort of a maverick masculinity. For me, it's more of a soft mask sort of presentation, or something that looks traditionally masculine, sometimes dabbling in feminine, but more in the neutral to masculine range for me. Even though I'm non-binary, the masculine part is typically there in some kind of way. I don't prefer an androgynous presentation for myself. I also want to make note that I know people have this sentiment like non-binary people don't owe you androgyny, but we're not really in a place where androgyny has been celebrated in non-binary people. So while non-binary people don't owe you androgyny, like, they're still going to be androgynous, and they are still, I guess, judged, discriminated against for being androgynous, because non-binary is seen as this, like, woman light sort of identity. You're just like a woman, but you want to call yourself non-binary and do away with all the genderedness of being a woman. A lot of non-binary people are assumed to be that. They're expected to be more feminine in their presentation. And sometimes they are expected to be more masculine, because in their brain, this is kind of a woman, but they're being gender non-conforming. So obviously that's masculine. So androgyny is not really celebrated in non-binary people. So I don't think the non-binary people don't owe you androgyny thing really helps in this kind of situation. Non-binary people should be allowed to be androgynous. We should be supporting and celebrating androgyny in non-binary people. Some non-binary people might prefer non-gendered language like person. Some might prefer guy or gal, boy, girl, man, woman, and some actually would prefer man or boy over man or girl over woman. Like, some people have a preference for the diminutive. Some non-binary people might not ever use entirely neutral language for themselves. For me, I've explained a guy or man, like, that works. Sir and Mr., sort of. Like, I'm indifferent to those, but never entirely ungendered or neutral language for me. I mean, obviously, it could be incidental. Someone calls me a person, but if they're not doing it as a way to avoid calling me a man, then, like, that's fine. I'm obviously a person. That's pretty much it. Just sometimes non-binary presentation and expression can be variable. Some non-binary people will want traditionally binary terms used for them. Some non-binary people will prefer entirely degendered language. They might present androgynously. They might be hyper-feminine, hyper-masculine, more in the neutral to masc range, neutral to feminine range. And there's obviously things outside of this, entirely neutral or entirely xenon or aporin related to apora gender. They might have an expression or a presentation that is maverin, otherin, literally anything. Like, non-binary people do not need to reference the binary in how they express themselves. Non-binary people will use a number of pronouns, and they may avoid using they, them pronouns entirely in favor of neopronouns or he, him pronouns, she, her pronouns, or things that are like spelling variants of those. I've seen he, him, like HY, HYM. I've seen she, her spelled the same way, or more like an SHIE, and then her, HYR, or here, it could be here. And some people might even use like a combination of those, he, she, him, her sort of thing. And some non-binary people might not want any of that. Maybe exclusively its pronouns, or maybe even no pronouns at all. Expression is supposed to be the reflection of or subversion of gender. Both of those things. So you can be non-binary and use they, them pronouns, but if you want to subvert that idea, you might be a non-binary person who uses other pronouns instead. And the same goes for presentation, the way that you dress, the way that you look on the outside. You don't always have to pass as non-binary. People don't always want to pass as non-binary or signify that they're non-binary, I guess. I don't know how you pass as non-binary, because passing tends to imply stealth, and there isn't really stealth when it comes to non-binary, not in the same way as being a stealth man or a stealth woman. So that can get a little complicated as well. It's variable. It changes. Non-binary people are all different. I mean, just like any other gender, but specifically in this case, You know, non-binary people have different ways of navigating binarity or avoiding it altogether, and it's going to look different. It's going to be different, and that's just normal, I guess. That's pretty much it. I wanted to talk about just a short little, you know, non-binary people and their gender expression. Almost a sort of 101 video, just something to discuss. I think that every so often I should pull away from the really complex gender discussions to sort of go back to the basics and talk about my experience with these topics and how they relate to my overall gender experience. So that's about it. I am signing off for now. See you later.